Hello everybody, my name is Michelle. Today is January 1st, 2021, and we are doing my favorite books of 2020. What am I talking about? What? Let's get into it. I decided I was just going to pick books that were favorites for the year and just end up with whatever number that was, 3, 6, 11. I didn't actually think I was going to get to 10, and in the end I ended up with exactly 10. I only have one 5-star read. It's my only 5-star read from the year, not counting a reread. I'm really proud of the variety I have on this list. I have two young adult contemporaries, one erotica, one adult sci-fi, 2 memoir, 1 literary fiction, 1 young adult fantasy, which is very shocking, 1 book of poetry. And that's just, again, I didn't set out to have this sort of a variety. The first book I'm going to talk about today is Diary of an Oxygen Thief by Anonymous. This was the first book that I read this year. I almost don't even care what you write about if your writing style is that good. And I particularly liked this. And one of the reasons that I think I liked this is because it's difficult to like, if that makes sense. All the characters are difficult to like. The subject matter is difficult to like. It's a very gritty, dark, sex, alcohol, betrayal. There's a bravery I feel authors have to write a book that they know some people are going to hate. Like, as a writer myself, not everyone's going to like your book, but this is the sort of book that some people would vehemently hate, like with a passion. Our protagonist is not a good dude. He uses and betrays women, and a big part of the plot is him being used and betrayed back by a woman. And so in some ways he gets what he deserves. In other ways, I think what she did to him was 10 times worse. Here's a quote. "The patient wants the nurse to feel the pain too. How else will she understand him?" And I felt like that was the real essence of the character, is that he hurts people because it's the only way he knows how to connect with them, which doesn't excuse his actions. And I don't think he ever tries to do that, which is interesting. Like, he knows he's a piece of crap. What more could I ask for? The next book I have to talk about, which I do not have a copy of, I got it from a library, but I'll pop it up here, is Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. People are so surprised when I tell them I have never read this before, and I've never read anything by Shel Silverstein. In fact, I just like a month ago figured out that Shel is a man. I didn't know that. So what's interesting about that is not him being a man, me having never read Where the Sidewalk Ends, is there's no nostalgic value for me. A lot of times people, it reminds them of their childhood, and that's why they like it so much. And sometimes we can't really objectively separate things that we have fond memories associated with, but I don't have any memories associated with it. And I decided to pick it up because I use poetry books as sort of like cleanser in between books, and I loved it. It was such a delight. It was so fun. The rhythm was awesome. The illustrations were awesome. The subjects of the poem were really valuable. Like, I can imagine reading this to my kids, and it has great life lessons. One of my favorite poems was, I think it's If I Was 1 Inch Tall. I mean, the message behind that is that if you're different or have a handicap of some sort, like, don't let that get you down. And so they're just really just hidden messages that are encouraging and about treating others right and being confident in yourself. That I gave 4 stars, I believe, and I wouldn't mind owning a copy, although I don't. The next book I want to talk about is The Dare by Harley LaRue. This is the only book that I gave 5 stars. I don't even think it's a book. It's like a short story. No, it's novella? I don't know. That I gave 5 stars this year. It's an erotica, which part of me feels ashamed to say, and another part of me is like, don't, guilty pleasures aren't real. So this book I very hesitantly gave 5 stars, just because I'm such a critiquer, and 5 stars to me just means like, oh, this book was the world, like I couldn't exist without this. And I don't feel that way about The Dare. Like, I haven't reread it, and I don't know, I probably will, but I don't know, you know, it's not gonna live in my mind as something I recommend to all these people all the time. But it felt unfair to not give it 5 stars just because it's an erotica, which is to say that a book about sex inherently cannot earn 5 stars for doing exactly what it set out to do. Do you know what I mean? So I gave it 5 stars because it was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly as it advertised itself. The build-up was good. The characters were great. I even felt like there was some development, and it was at like a party, and these two like frenemies, I guess, have a sort of banter battle. The sex trope, I suppose, is non-consent, and she's like shocked that him making her do these things she finds attractive. But I was surprised that despite that, there was all this consent worked into the book that I thought just was really awesome. It did exactly what it set out to do, so I can't give it anything but 5 stars. The next book I want to talk about is A Heart and a Body in the World by Deb Caletti. This book I gave 4 stars, but I think it has 5-star potential. For whatever reason, when I picked it up, I just, for like the first 50 to 100 pages or more, I just didn't want to pick it up anymore. Like, despite the fact that I was really enjoying it when I was reading, once I would put it down for whatever reason, I didn't want to pick it back up. And I don't know if that's because like I could tell that just this intense grief was coming, or it was a wrong time, but I think upon rereading it, which I will do, it might have 5-star potential. So this book is about a girl who basically quits her last couple months of high school in order to go with her grandpa in an RV and run across the country. It's about her mental journey and her physical journey while she's running, because the reason she does this is she went through a tragedy, and she is just having a really hard time processing it and dealing with it, and she's not able to get over it. Part of the pleasure of reading this book is figuring out what it was that she experienced slash did slash like went through. Bits and pieces of it are revealed along the way. Oh my gosh, it's devastating. I was devastated for her, and I really related to her. I think she's such a strong and useful female character, because the book deals with, first of all, what we're taught in the society as girls to be accommodating, to take up not that much space, to be polite, and the things that we can think are rude, like standing up for ourselves or saying no, aren't rude. She has this guilt over what she feels was her part in this tragedy, and everyone else is calling her a hero. You're a hero for doing this run and for what you went through and surviving, and she doesn't feel that way. And once it's revealed what's happened, I totally see, you know, why she thought that and why she was unable to accept other people's opinions of her, because she needed to process things herself and forgive herself and justify her own role. I thought this did a great job with dealing with this deep sort of sadness, but without there being absence of hope. You know, there was never that, and she had a beautiful support system, and her healing process I felt was realistic, and I thought there was good social commentary on, like I said, women and women's, girls' bodies as well, and you know, what we are taught is ours, and the sort of weaponization of the existence of women and women sexually, or not even sexually, but just physically. It's perceived by men sexually, and so there was a lot of sort of power dynamic things explored there. Talking about this right now is making me want to reread it. It has great use of the heart, both like anatomically and metaphorically, and the writing style was great as well, so I would recommend this. The next book I have to talk about, and the last book I have a physical copy of with me, is Challenger Deep. I suppose you figured that out, by Neal Shusterman. Neal Shusterman is one of my favorite authors, and this is my favorite book by him. Interestingly, it's the only contemporary book that I don't know if it's the only one he has. It's the only one I've read. He overwhelmingly writes fantasy and sci-fi, which I also love, and dystopian type things. It does the same thing that one of my favorite books, Jellicoe Road, does, where there are sort of two parallel stories, and as the book goes on, you see how they connect. So Caden has an inner world, which is where he is a staff member on a pirate ship, and then an outer world where he gets sent away to a live-in rehab, not rehab, but like facility for, not me playing with the camera with my foot, for people with mental illness. There are drawings throughout like this that are just supposed to be another part of Caden's inner world. And something I appreciated so much about this book is that while it is fiction, it's based in very real events. It was written with the help of his son, who has the same mental illness that the protagonist has, and the pictures that were drawn inside were actually drawn by his son when he was in the midst of an episode of his mental illness. And so it just makes it hit that much harder. That wasn't articulate. This is a great book though. My next favorite book of the year is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Am I really behind the trend on this? Yeah. Do I care? No. So I have a video, which I will link over here, of my reading Ready Player One and then watching the movie, which was maybe the worst thing of all time, but that's hyperbole. But originally I looked on Goodreads, and I originally only gave the book 3.5 stars. And I think I just get stuck in being too critical sometimes of the actual quality of a book. And am I going to reread Ready Player One? Probably not. It's so meticulous and detailed and long, and there's a lot of history in it and all that kind of stuff. But I enjoyed it a lot, so I bumped it up to a 4 now that I'm thinking about it. You know, I remember so many details about the book, like so many of the challenges and just the minute little aspects of the world that were just clearly rendered. And it's basically the opposite of, in February or March, I read Educated by Tara Westover, and I originally gave that book 5 stars. Everything just started leaving my brain about that book. Like, nothing sticks out to me anymore. I don't remember that much about Educated, and so it's not on this list. Whereas Ready Player One, which I originally only gave a 3.5, is on this list because it was just so evocative and memorable. I thought the world was developed really well. I really rooted for Parzival, whose name was Wade. He was a great character to root for, and he was a hero, but he wasn't your typical hero, which I really liked. And in a lot of ways, he was very ordinary, which I think was cool to see. The next book is Ink in the Blood by Kim Smeshkal, and despite these being in no order and me thinking I probably don't have a clear favorite from this year, Ink in the Blood was probably the book that got me the most emotional. And this is not sadness necessarily or anything like that. Just pulled me in and really invested me, and I loved the characters and I loved the relationships and the romance and the conflict and the world created and the atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. I just and I read it in early February, I believe, so it's been a long time. And I don't want to say too much because I have a whole portion of a video, which I will link, dedicated to talking about it. But it was a great book, so unique. It combines so many elements, which I love: tattoos, theater, cult religion, like I've said before, I'm really not into fantasy books, and I think part of that is me prejudging them. But I loved this book, and I'm so excited for Curse of the Divine. If you like, friendship, found family, an uprising, an entity that sort of resembles the demon, slow burn romance, the what is that called? Steampunk goth aesthetic, circuses. If you like any of that stuff, just go read this book. Another book, and I've said this a couple of times, just an absolute delight to read. It is The Disaster Artist. I got it as a free selection for my VIP month on my audiobook subscription, and I knew there was a movie, and I knew the Franco brothers were in it, and I love the Franco brothers, and so I decided to download the book. And I hadn't seen the movie, and I didn't know about The Room at all. I didn't know it was this cult classic, just terrible film. And having not experienced the book, if I had seen the movie, I don't think I would have finished it. I don't think I would have appreciated it for how bad it is. But it sounds like so much fun to just go like with a live audience and interact with this film, like throwing spoons. And now that I know the history behind the making of this, I would not believe this was real life if I didn't know that it was. It's just absolutely shocking, the person that Tommy Wiseau is and the things that he was able to do. And it's crazy. And the book was so much fun on its own. And then to have 2 movies to then consume as well. If you don't know, it's basically a behind the scenes of the making of The Room, which is heralded as the best, worst movie ever. And this young actor model sort of stumbles into a partnership with this older man who is somehow foreign, who's very, there's a secrecy around his name, where he's from, how old he is, where he got all of his money. And he writes a script, and he's like, I want you to star in my movie, and I want you to help make it. And it's about the movie coming to life, basically against all odds. I would recommend then consuming the other medias as well, just for the full experience. The last book I have to talk about, I just finished on Christmas Eve, so in the nick of time. I really didn't think there was going to be another addition to the list. Alas, there was. It is called Two White Queens and the One-Eyed Jack by Heidi Van Palesk. I hope I'm saying that right. And this is one of my NetGalley books. Is that unfair for me to put that on this list? It's not out yet. It's going to be out in February. February or March, depending on what country you're in. I believe in the introduction, she said she took all these things that she had either experienced or someone in her life had experienced or she had heard of through somebody, these elements of a set of albino twins, an ancestral rape, a boy losing his eye and getting a glass one, and she basically put them all together to get this book. And when I read that, I was like, this is going to be so interesting to see how they tie together. And really, they don't. And I'm not bothered by that at all. Like, I can't tell you the plot. Often with literary fiction, is there one? Maybe a little bit. But it's more about the character development and the characters' relationships to one another. It jumps from POV to POV to probably throughout the book half a dozen to a dozen people. And I'm generally very wary of multi-POV books because I think it's easy to fall into one or more of your POVs being weaker. And then, while someone is reading, I would be like, dang, I just wish we would get to, my favorite POV because this one is kind of boring or not as tense, or like this one left off on a cliffhanger. And I didn't experience that at all. I enjoyed all the POVs. I never wished we were in anybody else's perspective. It had good I don't know if you would call it disability representation. Two of the characters are missing. Can you hear that? That's how I'm singing. Are missing sight in their eyes, or an eye, and then we have the albino sisters, which I think genetically does, it really affected their sight. I think it affected their hearing. Obviously, it affects society's perception of them. And then we had LGBT representation, and we had cultural representation. There was a lot of history with Germany, and they travel back and forth between Germany and Canada, which I thought was really interesting. It follows them over a course of 20 to more years, which, come to think of it, is another thing I'm not usually a fan of, but I did really like it. Some of the images were so evocative that they will stick with me for a long time. One of the characters is a photographer, and he has these sort of inklings where things are going to happen, and he takes a couple of other characters to somewhere in Germany where he says, I think this thing is going to happen, and we want to be there to capture it. And the final image that's created, the way it's very historically and culturally relevant, but then it also brings back around everything in the story, from the first image of him falling from the tree and losing his eye, and how that carries forward for him, for his mom, for the boy who told him to climb higher, who thinks it's his fault. How that all comes back around together into the final image it was so powerful. The next book I want to talk about is Dear Life from My Friend. Dear Friend, from My Life, I Write to You. What is this called? I Write to You in Your Life by Yiyun Li. She, I think, has the potential to be one of my new favorite authors. This is a memoir that deals equal parts with mental health and being a writer, and how those are oftentimes intrinsically connected. It's very philosophical. It's very thought-provoking. Like, I was sitting there reading on the couch, and I just, not of, my own volition, I just kept going, and then my mom remarked on it, so then I became aware of it every time I was going, like when there was really just something to think about. She has such a bleak opinion of herself that she almost wishes to not influence anyone, which is inherently dichotomous to being a writer. She defines herself first and foremost as a writer, above being a woman, above being a wife. It's a lot to think about. How do we categorize ourselves in our own minds? This is my quote book. I don't really know what this says, but I think it's so provoking. A writer on the committee asked about my mother's absence from the narrative. A mother is not always central to a story, I said. Perhaps my mother is only a flat character. If that's the case, he said, we would appreciate learning it. That she is a flat character? I said. No, that you think she is, he corrected me. And I guess it explains this concept that she deals with, where she wishes not to reveal any of herself to anyone, and yet you cannot write and not reveal yourself, and what you think you are not revealing reveals as much as what you are. What is not written says as much as what is. Oh, here's something interesting. Is the wish to escape suffering selfish? It is considered so with suicide. I distrust judgments on suicide. They are, in the end, judgments on feelings. I feel like I should have something articulate to say after each of these quotes, but I think that such the great power of this book is that it is a little bit beyond me, and so I would be doing you a disservice if I attempted to explain these things that I do not think I have the knowledge to explain. I really recommend this book, especially if you're looking to work on yourself at all. I think it's a great tool. Yeah, those are my 10 favorite books of 2020. I'm really excited to read for 2021. Let me know if you've read any of these. Like, please let me know if you've read any of these. I want to talk about them with you. And even if you didn't like them, you know, don't be afraid to tell me, because I think that's so interesting. Especially like a couple of these, you know, like Diary of an Oxygen Thief. I will super not be surprised if you didn't like it. What's interesting is I feel like my rating system is so much different than most other people's. Or like, I was watching Lala's video and she was like, I had 40 books I wanted to talk about. And to be fair, she reads like 3 times as much as I do, but I struggled to get to 10. I mean, I didn't force myself, and these 10 books are really solid and I'm really glad they're on the list. But yeah, that's what I should learn. Be less critical. These books were awesome, and writing is awesome, and reading is awesome, and 2021 is gonna be awesome. So have a good one. Stay hydrated. Happy New Year.